Rolling when you're ready, still.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, boom, man's here with Dean Okai. So you reached out because you wanted to make a video about what you see as the you explain the reason I come here now.
So last week, one of the most important things happened in terms of us finding a commonality, and it was a universal adoption. When the young lady was attacked in Ashford, it was a universal adoption that we need to protect our children. I saw everybody align on that. And you saw the racists come online and troll around it. But Forever Family actually went to Ashford, Kent, and a lot of us in terms of the community. I personally didn't. That's not my role anymore. And I'm not trying to take any credit or kudos for it. I don't need it. And we shouldn't be seeking it when we don't put in the work. Raspect went to Ashford, and it went from a universal adoption of us speaking about little sister that was attacked, who has a lion and a warrior spirit, as does her sister, to then me seeing personal attacks online. Now, this isn't aimed at anybody personally, but there's something that we do as men, and this is why I want to address it. I've got Raspect's phone number, and people sent me the clips of the travellers, or so-called clips of the travellers, that turned out to be fake news, saying that they were seeking revenge for going outside the house and calling out the family, and feeling that it was egregious that people were chanting pikey outside their yard, which is a family home, and I'm in agreement with that. Because if you were chanting the N-word outside a family home, it does something very important. It takes a man's options away from him because you do it publicly. And this is something else that we have to address. So it went from us having universal adoption to then Raspect being attacked online. Now, I've got Raspect's phone number, and I sent him a message personally. I sent him a voice note, and we had our communication backwards and forwards until there's a point of clarity. You see, if I've got a man's phone number, I don't need to speak to anybody else about that man. If I have a man's phone number, I don't need to make a public broadcast. Now, even though it may have been fake news about the travellers aligning 1,000 men, please understand one thing. They are culturally aligned enough to be able to have utilized their phone tree, which is a security protocol, to align 500 men. They can do that. There's a reason we can't, and it's because we do what we do. There is a neo factor that we look for, that we have to be the one. We delude ourselves. There is no one. If you think about a hamburger, there's a bun, there's a burger, there's some vegetables, there's ketchup. That's who we all are. We're all components of that burger. But we need to come together to actually form the burger. Without that, there's no meal. And we don't have any meal because we will keep seeking the attention of virtue signaling. There's nothing wrong with holding people accountable.
Yeah, I was gonna say because how do you distinguish between like attacking somebody personally or even indirectly versus critiquing man in order for them to improve on their personal downfall or something? You get me?
I just addressed it.
You're saying this page man.
I have your phone number.
Yeah.
And you're a man and I'm a man. And the first thing I know that we have as men is what? Our dignity, right?
Yeah.
So why would I challenge your dignity so that we turn this into something else if I have your phone number? For me to hold you directly accountable, I'm going to phone you. And if I don't have your phone number, I'm going to reach out because I know that we're not separated by more than 2 degrees of separation. It's a very small community. You know it, I know it, and everybody watching knows it. Everybody knows each other. There are people that I don't like. I can reach out to them. There are people that I despise. I have their phone number. And all of these people are in WhatsApp groups where we've seen each other's numbers. We know how to contact each other. So outside of that, there are also back channels because you don't have to directly speak. The people who sent me the videos, didn't directly want to reach out to Raspect. They said, I'm the wrong person. So that's a back channel, right? If you come into a certain space and you decide that you're an advocate, you have to understand protocols. So there are civic and social protocols, there are security protocols, and then there are protocols between men of human decency, right? Because we have our dignity. So it's not that you let somebody run around the street buck naked and you're saying you're not going to address them. There are protocols for us addressing and keeping accountability within our community. And we need to observe those. Because as much as you can go out and make wanton videos, so can they. But then where do we find ourselves? And then where is the issue where we did all of that work that came together, where everybody was universally aligned, not like 90%, universally aligned around a child who is vulnerable. And we keep talking about our children being vulnerable to racism. So why would we distract from what was actually accomplished with everybody coming together? I don't agree with standing outside travelers' homes and calling them pikeys any more than I agree with them coming here and calling us N-words outside our homes. It's wrong. And that's where the accountability is. And that's where it ends.
But see, like how you just said that on the camera though. So for the next person to do the same thing, 'cause I don't know specific. I don't know if you want to go into specifics of what you heard or what, but I don't know what you specifically heard somebody say publicly that you feel like they shouldn't have said.
There are broadcasts where men have come out and called out Raspect, and there are things that make it personal. Now, it's not necessary to address individuals, because this is where it does get personal. What I'm speaking about more importantly, because this is going to happen again, is the protocols. It doesn't make sense. And if I'm on a live, I'm not talking about a man. Do you understand? I'm talking about a proposition. Something that is right or wrong, something that requires to be done, or an initiative that we need to get behind. But for me to come and personally attack a man or a woman, that is for kudos. And that doesn't make sense to me. And it's something that we have as a community in particular that is our downfall.
Because here's what I'm saying, Carl. I feel like us black people, we lack personal critique, like amongst for our shortcomings, wherever it may be. You get me? And there's a culture of too many yes men. Like people want to be surrounded by yes men, and me, like trying to put myself in a position of an outside observer, it's like raw. If I identify a weakness in my brother, or my brother identifies a weakness in me, I want to encourage man to
absolutely
bring that to my attention, rather than I go outside and my open enemy sees that and be like, right, you don't even know that. He's got this little chink in his arm.
Nobody's seeking to circumvent accountability. Because the first thing I will do is reach out to the man involved. And I did that. I did that on Friday night. Secondly, I also made a comment on the guy's broadcast and said, I stand with Raspect. I said, what I don't agree with is calling people pikeys outside their family yard, because you take a man's options away from him. See, one thing about me, I'm either highly respectful or highly disrespectful. There's not really anything in between. Because if you're going to take a man's options away from him, then you have to be willing to deal with the response, right? So when I talk about not seeking to circumvent accountability, I'm not talking about groupies. I'm saying speak to that man directly, or approach a back channel to deal with that man, to hold him accountable. But what I don't agree with is the virtue signaling of going online, because what it does is it doesn't just undermine the work that's been done. It draws out other people in terms of our fan base, our following, our brothers and sisters that are next to us, to get on board with that, rather than focusing on what is accomplished. And what we do is we deal with the micro rather than looking at the macro. The bigger picture is we've got far too much to do, because we are nowhere. And we're actually at the 11th hour, and it's 5 to 12. what is happening at the level of the World Economic Forum and bills such as the Police and Crime Bill and the Nationalities and Borders Act, the UK isn't even on a democratic standard anymore. And what we don't realise is our citizenship could be stripped tomorrow. So for us to be having these little internal wars for entertainment purposes publicly makes zero sense. And that needs addressing equally as much as somebody making a faux pas in terms of taking people outside of a yard in Ashford, Kent. So if you don't have an agreed set of protocols before you head out, you're heading for disaster. But we deal with our people and we do that internally.
So supposing a man does reach out to someone, because I've heard people complain that I jumped on a couple of them lives as well. Well, one of them, and I don't want to put everybody in the same. I can't tell people's intentions. I told the brother that I respect that you offer an alternative perspective most of the time, fam, and that's specifically the reason I come and check for man. You hear me?
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's lacking, fam. Like I said, I'm anti this yes man thing. I want to like forget your emotions. If you done something wrong, then you done something wrong. We need to address that so we can step forward with the right foot next time. You get me? That's my thing. Forget about how it may look and how it makes you feel. We have to learn how to deal with our emotions and suppress those feelings. You get me? But
you just said it. So I can offer an alternative. I can offer an alternative perspective.
Yeah.
But if I say it in an emotive way, then am I really asking this? And I say it in a disrespectful, emotive way.
Yeah.
Am I really expecting a composed response?
Yeah.
So when I talk about protocols, we know what we're talking about because we're men. So
before I go, let me just finish my point. Though,
please.
Because I was saying like boom. Because man was saying to me like man's page man one away behind the scenes, over and over again, and it's the same thing. You get me? Like, and not just in regards to Raspect, but I've heard the similar type of sentiments in regards to hard-ass people. Not that I'm calling Raspect hard-ass. Me and him have our back and forth, you hear me? But
Raspect, I would tell you as I love you as my brother, he is hard-ass. And he knows, because I say it to his face. But these are things as men.
So then you go and speak to a man behind the scenes and the man keeps up the same behaviour or what you do then? What do you do then?
I would call him for a public conversation.
Okay.
And we've done these things in terms of having public debates, because what we're doing then is we're actually seeking to gain something virtuous out of it.
Yeah.
Because I can attack anybody, but I don't have any moral plinth that makes me any more virtuous than any other man.
Yeah.
Because we're all flawed in some area.
Most definitely.
So now, is this man going to go and seek the flaws in my particular area?
Yeah.
Because I don't have the protocols of respect to actually deal with them directly. See, none of us are actually in a position to be calling each other out, because there's some area of our life where we're lacking. I promise you, all of us, we're all lacking somewhere. Yeah. And if I say something to my brother and it's truly in love, I don't need to attack him. Do you understand what I'm saying? So mine is about protocols. It's not about the personal attacks. It's not about attacking the people that I'm actually speaking about in terms of those lives. It's about protocols, because our protocols have to start involving respect. They have to become formal at some stage, because there's a stage within advocacy where you can't keep talking about, oh, we don't have a black print for it, because we do. We've got plenty of black prints. There are things that happen behind the scenes all the time that work, that dissipate negative energies on a regular basis. There are things that dissolve arms on a regular basis. So if you say, I'm not aware, that's fine. But then if you're not aware, that makes you unqualified in a particular area. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because there's levels to everything. And if you are able to dissipate an arms, it's because you're qualified and you're aware. Now, if you're only able to escalate that because you take it public and then it becomes virtue signaling, then there's no upside of that. And as far as I'm concerned, whatever we do in terms of actions, it's either going to be a net win or a net loss for the community. And when I say the community, there are people who are going to follow you because you create followers the minute you become a broadcaster, right?
Okay.
So as much as we have to hold Raspect to account in terms of security protocols, and there were security protocols that were lacking in terms of discipline, because the first thing you're going to have is stewards, right? And stewards hold discipline.
Yeah.
But that means they have to have discipline in the first place. So that's holding people to account. But you can do that in a respectful framework. This thing should never be about personal attacks on men. And mine is to take the personal out of it.
Yeah, I'm with that as well, still. I'm with that. But like I said, it's not always easy to distinguish if a man's attacking a man personally or if a man's expressing his opinion that might be a valid opinion, but only because you don't like man, rather than he's trying to like patch man up, you get me?
So here's another thing. What I've seen in our community as well is sometimes when people feel things for a long time, it does come out emotionally. And that's how people might feel about somebody. And that in and of itself becomes personal, because it is personal. It's how you personally feel about them. Let me say something. You see, if I don't have any kind of emotional feeling about a man, he's just there, there's no emotion in it.
Yeah.
As I'm going to deliver my critique of the man or what he's done, there's zero emotion involved. It's clinical. So understanding the nuances of human behavior,
Yeah.
I know when it's personal. And I don't think we should pretend when it's not, because this is another critique of our community that we have to get over. We've got to get over the personal and just deal with what has happened. There's nothing so big that has happened between, as far as I'm concerned, any of the men in our community where you can't have a coffee unless you're dealing with mental illness. When somebody is mentally ill,
Yeah.
you're dealing with a different type of beast, and that has to hold a corner over there because they can't manage themselves. But other than that, and those characters do come to the fore and represent themselves as advocates as well. People who've been in a vulnerable people's space, people who've been housed as vulnerable, who present themselves just like any broken clock. If you pass it at 6 o'clock, it's right.
Mm-hmm.
But you go and check that in an hour's time and see where it is. So mine is, this is not for ordinary people. It's for aliens. I had this conversation with one of my brothers yesterday. It's not for ordinary people. If you're not an alien and if you're not developing yourself beyond what people think about you, this isn't for you. And when I say you develop yourself beyond what people think about you, and I mean really not giving a russ, that comes down to you not seeking the validation from people for entertainment purposes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
We have to extrapolate our emotions from this thing. You have to have a cremation of care. And that cremation of care is very sobering. And it takes you out of that place where it's about having a moral plinth to hold people accountable. And it's more about wanting to advance who that man is by calling him out on what he does. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's the point I'm making.
Cool, man. Yeah, boy, ain't gonna understand. I don't understand unless you wanna. Because you wanted to do this video still, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. If that's what man wanted to say, you get me?
That's it.
Alright, man.
We need addressing.
Yeah.
And because I've seen it, and I've also been guilty of it, like Hov says.
Yeah.
I was guilty of it too, but not like them.
Okay.
And to quote him again, fame is the worstest drug known to man, worse than heroin.
Yeah.
So watch that component as well. Because when we get caught up in the headlights, and as I said, I was guilty of it too, but not like them, you got to catch yourself. Because that drug is one of the biggest endorphins known to man. And we don't want to get lost in that. Remember why we set out in the first place, and always keep it pure. Because if we call ourselves sovereigns as men, there's something we have to observe. You're not actually a sovereign unless you come to the table with clean hands. A sovereign comes to the table with clean hands. And that's why we have to disseminate particular information called disclosure. So when I come to the table with clean hands, I don't come saying I'm a vegan and I don't drink and I abstain from this. I drink rum, I eat meat, and I love one woman at a time. Clean hands, you understand? So no virtue signaling. I'm not Malcolm X. I drink rum, I like violent movies. I laugh with my friends. And I come with clean hands in my disclosure. This is what we need to do. Because when we're hiding certain proclivities, they're going to come out. When we're hiding certain things in our background, such as domestic abuse or violence towards whoever, it's going to come out. Clean hands. And when we approach it from that perspective, we've put everything out in the street. It doesn't matter. Whatever you want to say about me is inconsequential to me because I've extrapolated my emotions from it. Does that make sense? And now we just approach advocacy, if we come into that space, as sovereigns with clean hands. That's it.
Cool, man. I respect Uncle, man. Yeah, man. Blessed.